Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with the Dean. I'm Turney Stevens, Dean of the College of Business at Lipscomb University. My guest today is the Honorable Hiroshi Sato, who is the Consul General for the nation of Japan, based here in Nashville.
Yes.
Welcome to the campus.
Thank you for inviting me.
I think I should call you the Honorable, but for the purpose of this program, may I call you Mr. Sato?
Yes, okay, no problem.
Well, Mr. Sato, we are truly honored to have you, and maybe a good place to start the conversation would be to understand why there is a consulate for the nation of Japan in Nashville, Tennessee.
Yes, thank you very much for asking this question, because this is a very important question. 4 years ago, in 2008, until then, the Japanese consulate was located in New Orleans, in the state of Louisiana, covering this part of the United States. But 4 years ago, in 2008, we moved. Japanese government decided to move our Japanese consulate from New Orleans to here, covering the same area, covering 5 states, which is Tennessee, Kentucky, Mississippi, Arkansas, Louisiana. The reason, there's a very good reason, that is the very rapidly growing business partnership between Japan and this area, Tennessee, and especially Tennessee and Kentucky. As you know, about 20 to 25 years ago, a lot of Japanese companies like Nissan, Bridgestone, landed in Tennessee, and also Toyota landed in Kentucky. So the business partnership has been growing very rapidly. And now we have 179 Japanese companies active in the state of Tennessee. So that is the reason why we moved our Japanese consulate to here. And I was appointed as the first Consul General of Japan in Nashville. And well, actually, we are the only country who has a consulate office in the state of Tennessee.
Well, we are honored to have the consulate here, and I'm sure many people would want to ask you, so what is the difference between an embassy, for example, and a consulate?
Okay.
Why is there a consulate here? What functions does it perform?
We have Japanese embassy in Washington, D.C., in the capital of the United States, to negotiate, to have a constant communication with the federal government. But in the United States, each state government has a very strong power, separate from the federal government. So we have to have kind of continuous and regular contacts with state government, and to make sure the business between Japan and the United States are going smooth, and to make sure that the Japanese residents in the United States are doing a good job and doing their jobs and lives in a comfortable and preferable conditions. We sometimes negotiate with the state government instead of federal government. We have 15 Japanese consulates all over the United States, which is the biggest number of Japanese consulates in one country, of course, because 40% of the total Japanese people living outside of Japan are living in the United States.
Is that right?
Yes. We have 1 million Japanese people living outside of Japan, and 400,000 Japanese people are living in the United States. That shows how close our bilateral relations are.
Well, I think in the lifetime of most of us who are active today, post-World War II, Japan and the United States have become very close allies as well as friends. World War II, of course, was another matter, but we got past that, and now our nations are very close. And so the news a year ago during the earthquake and the tsunami was devastating, not just to Japan, but it was also emotionally very upsetting to all of us in the United States. So let's talk about that for just a moment. What is the current state of things in Japan relative to recovery from those two disasters?
All right. Thank you. Before answering your question, I just would like to say that we thank all the American people so much for the support, sympathy, assistance, and encouragement many American friends have given us, extended to us, especially for the victims in Japan right after the disaster of tsunami and terrible earthquake happened in Japan last March. I just cannot describe by words how much that support from the American friends meant to us and how much strength it gave us to stand up from the debris and to rebuild our nations. Since to answer your question, since last March, over the past 1 year, Japan has been recovering very steadily and strongly, thanks to your support and thanks to probably the resilience of the Japanese people. Most of Japan have returned to normal. If you visit Tokyo, you can't see any signs of disaster last year, except, of course, the directly affected area in Tohoku, the southeastern coast of Japan, as well as the 12.4-mile zone around the troubled nuclear power station. Other than that, we have come up to almost affirmative economic growth, despite the fact that the damage caused by the tsunami and earthquake was something like 3 to 4% of our national GDP. But we came up quite well, and probably we are going to record 2 to 3% economic growth this year.
I'm curious to learn what you learned from that experience. For example, I was in Florida just 2 weeks ago, and as I drove along the coast, I came to the Port St. Lucie nuclear power plant, just a few hundred yards from the ocean. Exactly the same situation as was true in Japan. I go to New York frequently on business. People say that if a tsunami struck Manhattan, there would be total devastation. And so we're very vulnerable, even though we think it's impossible for it to happen here. You thought it was impossible there. So what have you learned, and what advice would you give us?
Yes. Well, yes. Japanese people were prepared for the upcoming earthquake, because we are an earthquake-inflicted country. From the early childhood, every Japanese are trained for the emergency situation caused by the earthquake. So we thought we are well prepared. And that was true in a sense that no high-rise buildings topple. Not at all. No buildings collapsed because of this very big earthquake, which is it's said to be an event in 1,000 years. No building topple, but we did not expect 130 feet high tsunami. Our estimate, scientific reasonable estimate, was the maximum height of the tsunami was something like 40 or 50 feet could hit, and we were prepared. But this tsunami was 130, 40 height, and we were not prepared. So what we learned is that we cannot forecast the magnitude of the natural disaster, which could be unprecedented any time. So we have to be prepared much more than we can reasonably expect. And that is what we learned. So until last March, we thought our safety measures is the world #1 safety measures for the protection of nuclear power station, but it was not enough. So we are now reviewing all the possibility of the even bigger earthquake and tsunami. So we have stopped all the nuclear power stations in Japan, which were supplying 30% of the total electricity consumption. So we are now trying to do without those nuclear power stations electricity by conservation efforts. But we will come up to the conclusion maybe later this year whether we should continue to use nuclear power or not.
Mm-hmm. Now, we hear a lot about Japan, but we really don't understand as much about Japan as the facts would warrant. For example, Japan is one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Tokyo is one of the largest metropolitan areas in the world, one of the largest cities in the world. But also, there are more Fortune 500 global corporations headquartered in Tokyo than any other city in the world, more than New York City, more than London, more than any other city. So Tokyo is very important on a global basis. And I think it's very interesting that even as Americans and even as friends, we don't really appreciate that as much as we do. So what is the current state of the economy in Japan? We've heard a lot about the lost decade, the malaise that the Japanese economy has been in. Has that improved, and what are the prospects for growth as you move forward?
Well, first of all, as I said, we recovered already from the damages of the earthquake, mostly except directly hit area. So we have come up to the normalcy, so to speak, of our economy. Our economy is not growing as we were in 1970s or 80s, 88 to 10% economic growth or something, because our Japanese economy have come up to the kind of the stage of matured economy. So we can expect 2 to 3% economic growth, which is good enough because our population is not growing. Actually, our population has started decreasing because of the a small number of children, and our population is kind of starting decreasing. So we are going to have 2 to 3% economic growth in the future.
We also, I think, misunderstand Japan's Army and Navy. Japan has one of the largest defense budgets in the world. It's a heavily armed nation, despite being demilitarized after World War II. Today, you have a very active military force, if I'm not mistaken. And are you worried about China just a few miles away?
First of all, our military budget is, compared with other nations, is not big. It's 0.9% of the total GDP, our military expenditure, whereas United States 3.8%, and China is more than 8% or something. Our military expenditure is something like similar to that of France, or smaller than UK, I guess. So our military expenditure is probably the 5th or 6th largest in the world, next to those countries like the United States, China, Soviet Union, Russia, and India, or something like that. And but at the same time, we have a peace constitution. drafted after the World War II, saying that we will not resort to war as a means to resolve international dispute. So, but at the same time, we have to defend our nation, of course.
Sure.
And so our defense force is in nature very defensive. But it is also the reality that Japan is surrounded by countries like China, which is still communist country, or Russia, or North Korea, which is also a communist country. So as far as the eastern part of Asia is concerned, Cold War has not yet ended. So we have to be prepared for the kind of unpredictable events. That is why we continue to have defensive military force. But at the same time, we cannot defend ourselves by ourselves. So we have a very strong military alliance with the United States to protect this area.
Well, let's go back and talk about business. And let's talk about that in the context of your competition with China and other parts of Asia, because these are very fast-growing economies.
Yes.
China is, of course, the rate of growth in China dwarfs the rest of the world and has for a number of years. What's the future of business in Asia? Do you see China as the dominant force in the future? How will Japan compete effectively?
Well, Japan has invested in China a lot. All the major Japanese companies, trading firms, manufacturing companies have invested in China. That is one of the reasons why China's economy is rapidly growing. So we think Japan is in the same boat of China. Rise of China, or rapid economic growth of China is welcoming, happening to us. The issue is in the future, as China grows, one of the prominent leaders, economic leaders in the world, together with the United States, European Union, Japan, and China too. Maybe together with Russia and Brazil and India, maybe. But China has to have a kind of reasonable responsibility as one of the leaders of economic powers. So we just would like to make sure that China is aware of that responsibility. For instance, the currency issues. They cannot just continue to control the exchange rates, but should be left to the market forces, for instance.
Should float.
That's right.
The currency should float.
Those kind of things has to be understood by Chinese leaders gradually, so that we can have a kind of shared responsibility for the world economy.
We've seen much news in recent months about increasing wage rates in China. There's been a growing amount of concern on the part of some U.S. companies who use Chinese manufacturing facilities to create their products about having good working conditions for the workers and fair wages, and so that has resulted in wages rising. Many manufacturers are beginning to relocate facilities into Vietnam, into Cambodia, other parts of Asia. I wonder what you think Asia will look like in 10 years. Where will the dominant powers be, or what will be the dominant powers in Asia?
First of all, China, yes. The rise of wages is causing many companies to move their facilities to. I think this is a natural flow, because at the same time, China is becoming not only a place of manufacturing, but it is becoming a very important market itself, which is welcoming to all the other industries because, for instance, China's automotive market will be growing. Probably in a matter of few years, it is going to be much bigger than that of Japan. Japan is the second largest automotive market next to the United States, but China will be bigger than that. So the American as well as Japanese automotive industries can expect the great potential for the Chinese market. Now, the future of Asian economy, we should have we should realize that Asia is a very diverse region, not like European countries. So we cannot have one single market like European Union. We have a very diverse economy, diverse country. So it is very important to have a harmonized regional cooperation. Otherwise, we can have a conflict, or we can have a severe competition each other that destroy our economies in the worst case. So we should have a very close regional cooperation, which is different, probably different from the character of like a European Union, because we are very diverse society, diverse countries in Asia.
You mentioned a minute ago that Japanese companies have made significant investments in China.
Yes.
I wonder if Japanese companies are making those same kinds of investments in the rest of Asia, and specifically in India. Are great Japanese companies moving to India, for example, to create large facilities there?
You know, the Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia kind of took off. But prior to that, Japanese economy invested a lot in those Southeast Asian countries. And now China, we invested a lot, and the Chinese economy kind of taking off very, very rapidly. The only part, we are not the first country investing was India. And many American companies and European companies went to India first because of the historical bonds between European countries and India. So we are latecomer as far as Indian market is concerned.
I've read both sides, both arguments, that on the one hand, it's a positive thing that the post-World War II generation, the baby boomers, are beginning to retire in Japan.
Yes.
And that younger people are beginning to come into the senior management positions in Japanese companies, that this will create a new spirit of innovation. I've also read that the younger generation does not work as hard in Japan. Both of these are true in the United States, and so this is not a criticism of Japan, it's just a question about your culture. Which is true?
Yes, we are worried that those younger people who are now in a position, taking a position of senior management in various companies, are brought up in affluent society, so to speak, and they are not working as hard as the Japanese people who created miracle economic growth in the 1970s or 1980s. We are a little bit concerned that those people can continue to have viable economic power in the Japanese economy. And another concern is that the Japanese people are so satisfied with their own lives, so they will not take a risk to get out of Japan and take a new frontier spirit and take a new initiative in countries unknown to them. So the number of younger people studying in the United States, for instance, are decreasing. That is one of the source of our concerns. Yes.
So in our country, of course, many U.S. Higher education institutions like Lipscomb University have created partnerships in other parts of the world. We just signed an agreement with the Hong Song College of Management in Hong Kong to exchange students. We'd be very interested in doing
Yes,
that
yes.
in Japan. Are your higher education institutions interested in exchanging programs with the United States?
They are very much interested in. But the issue is younger people are not as much interested as before in foreign countries. That is the issue but we are trying to persuade those younger people that the future of Japan should be not inside of Japan, but outside of Japan, because we are the very much international country, making a lot of business internationally. So the future of Japan is outside of Japan.
Well, here at Lipscomb, for example, Mr. Sato,
Yes.
we require every MBA student to do a global study course as a part of the MBA program. We're one of 15% of the colleges of business in the United States who require that. Many offer it, but we require it. Is that true in Japan? Do Japan universities require students studying, let's say for their MBA, to do a study course in other parts of the world?
No, not now. So
But they
I think we
should? You
should.
think-
Yes,
you think
I
they
think
should?
we should. I think we should learn from you. Yes, I think Japan and the United States have to have a lot of things to learn each other, and that is one of the points which Japan has to learn from your country.
Well, let me turn the question around in the time we have remaining. We're almost out of time, but
Yes.
we want to learn from you too. And we very much respect the success of the Japanese economy as well as the culture. And so I would wonder, in our closing time here, as a resident now of the United States, you live here.
Yes.
What are your observations about the United States? What do we do well, and what should we do better?
Well, I very deeply respect the American people when American people are faced with a crisis or difficult situation. American people think the crisis is also a golden opportunity to create a new industries, and that kind of very positive thinking is what we have to learn a lot. But at the same time, Japanese people are very good at enduring the difficult times, like the last earthquake disaster. The people, many friends of mine told me that American people are very much respect how the Japanese people reacted to that disaster.
Absolutely.
Without any trouble, no panicking. They are very, yes, we are very proud of that resilience of Japanese people. That is the one probably American people should learn from us. So we have, as I said, we have a lot to learn each other.
What do you enjoy most about living in Nashville?
Well, first of all, I love music, and I have my own band.
Really?
Well, yes. Well, since when I came here 3 years ago, seeing that Nashville is a great music city, I created my small band and within my consulate with my colleagues, and we play various places, and I'm enjoying so much.
Do you play country music?
Yes, I do.
So
country music and bluegrass.
So if I went to one of the honky-tonks down on Broadway about midnight some Saturday night, would I find you playing in there for the crowd?
Well, sometimes I'm invited to play with, one time I was invited to play with Mr. Vince Gill, the singer at Ryman Auditorium. So we played together, and we enjoyed so much.
Well, the next time you're playing at a honky-tonk, will you tell me where you're going to play, and my
Okay.
wife and I will come and enjoy the
All right,
performance.
I
How's that?
will tell you that.
Thank you so much for being on the Lipscomb campus today
Thank you very
and
much
for
for
being
inviting me.
our guest. Well, it's an honor to have you. My guest today has been the Honorable Hiroshi Sato, who is the Consul General for the nation of Japan. That consulate is based here in Nashville, Tennessee, and it is truly an honor to be a friend of Japan and to be your friend. So thank you for being here today.
Yes, thank you.
We hope you'll join us again soon for Conversations with the Dean.